Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact video series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we are going to talk about a topic from Batavia's past that we don't actually have any physical artifacts from, but it's still a very interesting story from the earliest part of the 20th century here in Batavia, when there was industry here that we don't see anymore. And that industry was actually the automobile industry. Now, in the 19-teens and 1920s, there actually were two automobile companies that grew up here in Batavia. Didn't last very long and were not successful in any way, but still were able to produce vehicles for people throughout New York State, really, as it didn't really get that much farther than that. A brief blip in the industrial history of Batavia and Genesee County that has a very interesting story. Now, the first automobile created here in Batavia was called the Genesee, and that actually gets started in 1911, though only ends up being one vehicle, and that is it. The line never gets any farther than that, but its compatriot that comes about a decade later, the Adria Motor Company, produces a few dozen cars, so a little bit more successful, but both these cars were known as touring cars and were somewhat expensive for the time, but still left a little bit of a mark and sort of are a precursor to other things like the rocket car that we know better here in Batavia. So I'd like to share you the history of these two companies and the automobiles that they create, as well as show you a couple pictures of some of the vehicles that actually were produced. So here we have a picture of the actual Genesee automobile that was created. Now, the story of the Genesee begins in 1911 when the first prototype was built in Batavia. It gained its name from obviously being built in Genesee County. It was partially manufactured at the former Bidwell plant on Swan Street and was unveiled in September of 1911. The Genesee was billed as the longest automobile ever constructed up to that point, and its dimensions definitely backed up that claim. It had a 48-inch wheelbase, the distance between the front and back wheels, and had a 96 horsepower, 564 cubic inch six-cylinder engine. The Genesee was a touring car capable of transporting up to 7 passengers, which was a large amount of passengers for an automobile of the day, and its interior matched the classic look of its body, as it was upholstered in black leather with gold trimming. It was said that the amount of leather used was even worth $200 at the time, a very large sum of money. It had both electric and gas lights, which were ignited by a system at the driver's seat, and the Genesee was to be only the first of a whole range of body styles for a much more affluent clientele, with prices ranging from $7,000 to $10,000. However, the production of any more vehicles never materialized, as the Genesee was far from practical, especially on the unpaved dirt roads of the era. However, the prototype did get its use, as it was used by Dr. Harvey Burkhart, a dentist in Batavia and the first mayor of the city, who was also one of its backers. He would drive the automobile from Batavia to Buffalo during his many travels, and however, it didn't go unscathed during its time of service to Dr. Burkhart, as on one trip, it was involved in an accident where it suffered a bent axle, a broken spring, and a blown tire. And Burkhart used it in ways that we might not think, as he was known to drive this very large car around the fairgrounds racetrack, and things didn't always go as smoothly as he hoped. Now we'll move on to the Adria Motor Car Company, and you can see one of their models created here in Batavia in the picture here. However, the company does not begin in Batavia, but that's eventually where the operation settles. The company was begun by a man named Louis Rimsack, who had considerable experience in the automobile industry, and in early 1921 he began developing his concept of his Model A1. The prototype was developed in Cleveland, and this was done before a factory space could be bought out in Batavia, which happened in August of 1921. The company would then acquire the Gray Machine and Parts Factory, which was the future site of Doler Jarvis on Evans Street. Remsack claimed that his cars had features not seen elsewhere, including non-load-bearing axles and springs with curved ends. He even boasted that he traveled from Cleveland to Batavia in 47 minutes in one of his automobiles, which even today you can't do. Timothy Daly, the head of the Daly Construction Company, was placed in charge, and Mr. Remsack ran into legal troubles with a former partner over a patent infringement, which suspended production for some time. The company also suffered from severe financial instability, as Remsack was not able to generate the amounts of investors he hoped for, and this actually forced Mr. Dilly to leave in early 1922. And by March of that same year, the Adria Motor Car Company was essentially no more. In less than a year in existence, the company produced somewhere between 20 and 40 vehicles, depending on which source you look at, though that number could even be exaggerated to a certain degree. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of our artifact video series, even though there weren't any actual artifacts in it, but nonetheless, in case you've missed any of our previous videos, go and check them out on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And if you really enjoy them, be sure to like and subscribe anything, as it helps you get notified ever sooner and helps boost the channel a little bit more. And as always, if you found any of these artifacts or topics interesting, be sure to stop by the museum and check them out for yourself, and we'll be sure to tell you even more stories about them and really expand your knowledge about things in Genesee County.